Welcome to The Word. I'm your host, Scott Rubin. We are the show that discusses the Torah, 5 books of Moses that became and is the foundation for the Jewish faith. The Christians believe in the Torah. It makes up a large part of their Bible as well, as it does with the Jewish Bible, the Tanakh. Even the Muslims believe that the Torah is a direct revelation from God through his prophet Moses. But how did it ever happen? How did 3 million Jews hanging out in the desert camp accept one book? And we're not exactly the most easily convinced group of people. In fact, the Talmud says that possibly 80% of the Jews, they didn't even leave Egypt during the Exodus, and that was after witnessing the awe of the 10 plagues. I mean, we're hard people to convince. And the 20% of the Jews that did leave, they started questioning God and Moses, pretty soon. Moses didn't come down from Mount Sinai fast enough. They started worshiping a golden calf. Moses' brother Aaron even helped make the damn thing. And this is after the Jews walked through the Red Sea that God had parted to free them from the shackles of slavery. We are a tough crowd, man, to persuade. Just ask any Christian. The early Christians, pretty much all Jews, had unbelievably hard time convincing Jews that Jesus was Messiah. These early Christians had no choice but to move on and start converting the Gentiles. But that didn't stop them. 1,500 years later, Martin Luther was convinced that during the Protestant Reformation, where the Christian faith was freed from the constraints of the Catholic Church, that surely the Jews would hop on board. He believed this. We didn't. So how did it happen? How did 3 million Jews, after 40 years wandering in a desert, end up believing in a book about an invisible God, told by an invisible God called the Torah? And without any marketing, they did, you think there was no right? There were no book tours, there were no book signings, no Moses going on talk shows, hamming it up with Kimmel. And then Jimmy holds up the scrolls at the end. Get his book on Amazon. What is it called? Torah, you call it Torah, Jimmy. No, we didn't get that. Moses didn't have a blog, no YouTube videos, no buying 10,000 scrolls to pump up his sales ranking on Amazon. Sure, he did manage to knock out 13 scrolls and hand them to all 12 tribes of Israel and held back one. And somehow it caught on just with those 12 books. Really. Now, that wouldn't even cover half the nightstand drawers in a Motel 6. I'm not even sure that he could have done that. They're large scrolls. You can't get them in there. Maybe you could get it in the mini fridges. I don't know. So what got the Jews to buy into this book, this Torah? Perhaps they were really thirsty. Thirsty for meaning, for history, for purpose, for explanation, and of course, for water. Decades in a desert without a Brita pitcher, that's a tough ride. Well, the Torah fulfilled this deep thirst and still continues today. It really does. And let's give it a shot. So let's take a big swing of it with our special guests. He's been a host, cameraman for MTV's Catfish, the TV show. And now he has directed a fantastic new big HBO Max original documentary, 15 Minutes of Shame. Yes. And he's here with us tonight because, well, he has no shame. Welcome, filmmaker extraordinaire, Max Joseph. Hi, Max.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to talk about the Torah. Curious to know more as you were giving the brief history of the Torah there.
Welcome to the show. Let's move on. Who says you can't do stand-up comedy as an Orthodox Jew? Actually, nobody has ever said that. Although it does make being a prop comic a bit more challenging. Like when you're blowing up the giant rubber medical glove over your head. Very hard to keep your keep on with that bit, Welcome, non-prop comic, yes, stand-up comedian Menachem Silverstein.
Thank you so much for having me. If it's a show about the Torah, I don't really know what I'm going to be able to add to this. I just wear the kippah to, get the shows. I'm actually just a fancy Mormon. But we'll see what we can do. Let's go.
She may not be Jewish, but she's done more shows with us that she now claims to be bat mitzvahed. And I will not be sending the gifts. Welcome, my sidekick, Jackie Vene.
Why don't I get any gifts?
Well,
does this mean I get to go to Israel for my birthright? Because I really want to.
Oh, wow. Israel for birthday. That would be a special show. Maybe, Craig, why don't you work on that? Maybe we could get they'd arrest me if I was on the birthright show. The creepy old guy down in the back of the bus. You can see him at the world famous Comedy Store performing his headlining act. But at home, he's the opening act, changing diapers. Yes, welcome my co-host, Sandy Danto. So look, when we come back, we'll keep going and we'll see what's happening. So last week we were coming to the end of a long genealogical begot list of the ancestors of Seth, Adam and Eve's replacement child for the slayed Abel. And we are now just 2 generations away from the birth of Noah. As we continue, and we will read the last verse we covered on our last show. And Enoch lived 65 years. And he begot Methuselah. So now we continue on with the verses to be discussed today. Verse 22, and Enoch walked with God after he had begotten Methuselah 300 years, and he begot sons and daughters. And we move on to the next verse, 23, and all the days of Enoch were 365 years. What strikes me is that with all the begots list of all the ancestors before these verses, and there's a lot of them, incredibly, Enoch is the only one that walked with God. Maybe he had good moves. Who knew? Seriously. I mean, he was like the Michael Jackson of his time. He deserved to walk with God. What am I talking about? In the previous chapter, we learned of one of God's big punishments placed on Cain, and perhaps on man, after murdering Abel, that God will be hidden from Cain. Now think about it. God's like, he's now walking around with us. He's hidden. And it's possibly a curse on all of us. But here, after many generations and the introduction of the new bloodline of Seth, we suddenly have Enoch, a few generations later from Seth, walking with God. We're back, baby. Could there be a trigger to sense the divine presence? I mean, what's happening with Enoch? And perhaps walk with God even though he's seemingly hidden from us? It doesn't say God's no longer hidden from us. It just says he's walking with God, Enoch. Although it clearly states Enoch walks with God, it comes after 65 years of life and the birth of Methuselah. Is it possible that for some of us, the profound experience of witnessing the birth of your child could bring on a deep sense of being connected to the Creator? For some parents, childbirth is as if experiencing authentic miracle. I mean, you hear everybody almost say it, as if viewing the creation of life right before you. Perhaps this marvel of childbirth shook Enoch to the core of his soul, providing the moment where he fully embraces the reality of God, of a creator. Sandy, you're a parent, right? Do you, a recent parent, do you think that experience is so profound that it could actually make someone possibly walk with God?
In my experience, it's in retrospect. It was don't get me wrong, when my daughters were born, was really cool. But it was just kind of that genuine feeling didn't kick in right away. It took a little while. I'm not a love at first sight kind of guy. This divine feeling that you get from being a parent, it just didn't kick in. It was like taking mushrooms. They don't kick in right away. You think they've kicked in right away, but they take a little time to kick in.
It's just like taking mushrooms, by the way. Yeah, that's exactly. Oh, if it was only that easy, Sandy. It's just like taking mushrooms. Jackie, do you think there's something here about the witnessing of having a child that could possibly trigger someone to feel the divine presence on them, that they could walk with God?
I guess all I can draw from is my experience with my own baby, which is my cat. And I did have a dream last night where my cat came to me in my dream and told me that I could draw from his energy to be more godlike, because he holds Egyptian godlike energy.
Oh boy.
Real
I think you pretty
story.
much covered all the bases of like getting us. All right. You had to mention the Egypt part. All right, go ahead. But but part of it's true.
I
Part
don't
of
make
it,
the rules. I
you
didn't
just
tell
dream
him what
it.
to say.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
just dream it. And this continues from last week's show when you realized you were related to one of the witches that was burned at the stake at the Salem witch trial, which
Yes.
I still can't get over. But so I guess why not? And we will go to Genesis 5, verse 24. And Enoch walked with God, and he was no longer, for God had taken him. Well, again, we are reminded that Enoch walked with God, but now he's gone. Quote, for God had taken him. You know, there's that saying since ancient Greece, and people think it's Billy Joel, but it's actually ancient Greece. Only the good die young. Why does God take some and leave others? Could it be that someone that walks with God has a mission, and once it's accomplished, dare I say, God takes them? And even though they don't want to die, nobody does, their purpose here is complete. And as a reward of sorts, God frees them from the toil and pain of perhaps their earthly existence. Max Joseph, what do you think?
I think that surviving is kind of like a dirty business, and it's easier to stay pure and good when you are young. But the older you get, the more compromises there are to make, lose dignity, compromise your morals and your values. And so I think that if Enoch lived 365 years and maintained being a good person, then you can walk with God at that point, because you've passed every test there is.
Well said. Sandy, what do you...
God took Enoch. Maybe God took Enoch on an all expenses paid vacation to the coast of Jericho. I heard it was lovely in the fall of 3400 BC.
Beautiful this time of year. Menachem, you want to go?
What if walking with God is a bad thing? What if Enoch was that kind of annoying guy who was walking with God, and God was like, you can just stay over here. And he's like, God, I'm right here. And then God's like, I got to take you. I got to take you out. You're done. Enoch, stop talking. I'm sorry. We're not friends. Yeah. I don't know you like that. Leave me alone like all the others. And took him early and is like, we're done with this one. Failed experiment.
He was walking with God like behind, trying to catch up. And exactly. God was running from him.
Maybe walking is not divine enough for God. I would think if I'm going to be with God, I'm going to saunter, maybe a skip, something with a little air to it. You know, walking's a little pedestrian for God, don't you think?
Yeah, he should be flying at the least.
Or at least on a hover-round scooter with a Hamza sticker on it.
Yeah.
I just don't think I sauntered with God would make for a good t-shirt. I feel like walking with God is just a simpler bumper sticker, you know what I mean? For marketing purposes. You gotta.
What about I skip to my loo with God?
I skip to my loo is probably fairly accurate. All right, hey, when we come back, we're going to do our final segment. Yeah. We'll be right back. Welcome back. And we are reading from Genesis 5, verse 25 through 29. Hey, Jackie, you want to take this verse 25 and read that?
And Methuselah lived 187 years, and he begot Lamech. And Methuselah lived after he had begotten Lamech 782 years, and he begot sons and daughters. And all the days of Methuselah were 969 years, and he died. And Lamech lived 182 years, and he begot a son. And he named him Noah, saying, "This one will give us rest from our work and from the toil of our hands, from the ground which the Lord has cursed."
Has the birth of Noah possibly broken the curse that was placed on Cain and possibly man as well by God because of Cain's murder of Abel? Lest we forget the last chapter in Cain's curse, Genesis chapter 4, verse 12. When you till the soil, it will not continue to give its strength to you. You shall be a wanderer and an exile in the land. Does man now have no excuse to walk with God? Now that he has the ability to look up and out, and instead of just looking down and toiling in the ground. It's very clear that in the verses that we've read up to this point, that curses are not just one generation, that perhaps man can descend into such depravity that he can bring upon a curse that confines the perpetrator of the evil acts along with his heirs. Is it fair that Lamech and the other descendants had to till the soil in some backbreaking fashion because something Cain did a long time ago? But yet, aren't we all cursed in some way by the shitty actions of people that have become before us? Is this a warning by God to man that, yes, we sit on the accomplishments of our predecessors, but we also wallow in the muck of their vile actions or non-actions of a few? So, with that in mind and that lovely happy thought, Sandy Danto, what do you think?
Well, God, maybe he's experimenting. We're in Genesis, okay? We'll see more experiments to come, like that little test he gives to Abraham. But maybe this is God in college. The Big Bang was God's birth and infancy, and creation was infancy, and the Garden of Eden was his formative years, and now God's in college. And Scott, while you were in college, you probably experimented with like Quaaludes. You know, God's doing the same thing here, but with lineages and genealogy and curses. And you might have been more social in college, but this is God in his Dungeons and Dragons phase.
God in his Dungeons and Dragons phase. Am I supposed to bring that up to the rest of the group? Is this Menachem? Uh-oh.
Sorry,
He's
I'm busy
got a big holy book.
reading from my Torah.
This seems to suggest that the birth of Noah ends the curse. So can the birth of a child end the curse in our own life?
The birth of something new, can not only bring good into the world, but it can fix what was done bad. It can permeate the past and undo things that we kind of feel like we might have screwed up with.
Nice. I like that. I want to live like that. Jackie, can the emergence of something good, like a beautiful child, can that somehow make the past easier to handle?
Maybe the idea of a baby coming really transforms the energy so much because it's a completely new energy that you can draw from. And it's a completely new world being created. And maybe that energy is just so new and so fresh that it's so easy for that child to feel like they can make a difference because they're not yet convoluted by all of the past.
Max, you have a thought on this?
I don't know. I was just thinking Steve Jobs was this kind of Promethean character, right? Like he came to Earth for a very short period of time, and he had a company called Apple, which put in every single person's hand a supercomputer that allowed them to talk to each other. You know, and like seemingly a good thing, but maybe it is like the apple in the Garden of Eden. It's the fruit of knowledge that leads to all bad. And it takes a while for that bad to kind of ripple out, right? Like the initial bite of the apple is like, 30 years ago. And now it's rippling out generation after generation after generation until it's going to get so bad. People can't agree with each other. Everyone's fighting. Too much democracy, not enough democracy. Everyone's worshiping their phones instead of community or God or some higher thing. And so we need a flood, a pandemic, something to kind of like ground us again.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Wow. I love the apple. I love that this is the apple. We bit into it just a little
freaking
too.
There's a bite taken out of it. I mean, like, it couldn't be like a more sinister.
I know.
There couldn't be like a more sinister image.
I never made the connection that it's even bitten. Oh my God, that's fantastic. Jackie, your final thought.
The only Noah that I knew was this neighbor I had, and the only thing I remember about him was that I saw him eat a live spider. And somehow I feel like that.
And I'm glad. Okay. And the world changed. Okay, well, that's it. Thank you guys for coming on. It was great. We'll be back next week.